Good morning. We're going to wait a couple more minutes and we will start. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to our third USMCA quarterly update. It's our pleasure at McAllen Economic Development to sponsor Mr. Jorge Torres from Interlink Trade Services, who will give us this update on the USMCA, the changes that have occurred in the last quarter, and what is happening with regard to USMCA as we move forward with the implementation of the new trade agreement, North American Trade Agreement. We have a little bit of a difference in this quarterly update, because we also have two other co-sponsors in addition to MEDC. One is the CIC, which is Trade and Customs Services, which is a local company that works with Mr. Torres and also is supporting the trade and industry here in the local community. In addition to CIC, we also are pleased to announce that Aeromar, one of our local airlines that serves Mexico from McAllen, is also co-hosting this quarterly update with us. So as you and during today's event, you will be hearing from both CIC that will talk a little bit about their services during an intermission, along with Aeromar. And then stay tuned, because somewhere during the presentation, there will be an opportunity for some free tickets to fly to an Aeromar destination anywhere in Mexico. And remember, one of these sites that they fly to is Puerto Vallarta. So if you're going on vacation, why, that's a great place to go. So now sit back, listen to the updates, and we hope you profit from this quarterly update. And we look forward to continuing to offer you these services and these updates so that you can run your business better and more profitably through what we're doing here. So thank you again for attending, and enjoy it.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this third update on the USMCA. I really appreciate your assistance to this webinar. We're going to discuss some of the changes that have happened in the last few months. We're going to touch on subjects such as the automotive rules, labor issues, the energy issues, and other important matters relating to COVID-19 and its impact on the supply chain, as well as some trade statistics and some issues on the trade agenda from the Biden administration. So we're going to start the presentation right now, but just as an announcement, the raffle of the AUTOMOTIVE tickets will happen at the end of the webinar, and only people that are participating in the webinar will be subject for the raffle. Also, some people have only their names. So if you can edit and put your name and last name so that we can identify you in case you win the raffle tickets, okay? So let's start with the presentation. Okay, so I put a name on the presentation saying USMCA update 1 year after, because it's been a year since we implemented USMCA, July 1st. We're gonna refresh on topics that we already discussed in the last two webinars, because some people were not participating in those two, and also as a refresher, and then we're gonna move on with the topics that we discussed earlier. Okay. So as an agenda, we have the updates, refresher, some of the implementation issues that we're having in regards to automotive, labor, energy. And we're also going to discuss country origin marking rules, because that's an important change that it's coming about in the near future. And what to expect in the fourth quarter of this year and in 2022. And then we're going to touch on COVID and its impact on trade, and some comments regarding the Biden trade policy. So as a refresher, on November 30th, 2018, the USMCA was signed as an agreement. And then the three countries signed a revised agreement on December 10, 2019. That's when President López Obrador wanted to review this as well. So then the revised agreement was later ratified by the House of Representatives here in the United States on December 19, 2019, and then by the Senate on January 16, 2020. And then it was signed by President Trump on January 29, 2020. And as we know, the official implementation was on July 1st, 2020. There was no gradual transition. Pretty much the switch was turned off for NAFTA on June 30th. And then we began USMCA on July 1st. Obviously, at the beginning, for the first 6 months, at least from a CBP, U.S. Customs perspective, they did have some flexibility. It allowed parties to get familiar with USMCA rules and regulations, but as we're going to discuss later, right now it's per game. Some of the general changes, obviously, this is a little bit technical, but for example, the rules of origin are now under General Note 11 of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States, where NAFTA was General Note 12. Also, to claim preferential treatment on the USMCA, we now have different indicators with the letter S, and instead of NAFTA, which was MX or CA for Canada. Also, another change regarding special program indicators is that now U.S. origin products can, when imported back to the U.S., you can also claim USA preferential treatment. Before, under NAFTA, you couldn't claim NAFTA preferential treatment for U.S. goods. Either you claim other provisions, such as a 9801 provision, or you pay the general duty rate. But now you're able to claim USMCA for U.S. origin products as well. And then the regulations for U.S. customs regulations now they're under 19 CFR 182, whereas for NAFTA, they were 19 CFR 181. And then we had, under NAFTA, we had the specific marking rules under 19 CFR, which is Code of Federal Regulations 102, which will still apply under USMCA and beyond that. And we're going to cover that in more detail later on. We also have under USMCA something that NAFTA didn't have, which was a termination date, an expiration date, you want to call it. USMCA, it's going to be with us for 16 years with a potential extension of another 16 years. So it's 32 years in total. But at the 6th year, they're going to have a joint review of the countries to see whether they want to continue for the other 16 years. If they don't come to terms, then every year for 10 years, they're going to meet to try to resolve the reason why they don't want to continue. And if they don't get a resolution within those 10 years in the yearly meetings, then USMCA will automatically expire at the 16 years. So 16 years with a potential extension of 32 years. Other general changes is now that we don't have an official certification format. Before we had what we call Customs Form 434 in the United States. Now you only have to have certain data elements, 9 data elements. So there's no official certification format. We also have the drawback restrictions that we had under NAFTA for exchange of materials among the 2 countries. Also, this is more technical as well. Reconciliation for refunds of duties that stay the same as under NAFTA. Another important change is the de minimis rule, which increases from 7% to 10%. This gives a little bit more breathing room for non-originating materials to qualify as originating under USMCA. One of the key and major changes is the automotive rules, which we're going to discuss later in more detail. They were totally revamped, and we're going to discuss it's having major impacts now. Also, the importation and qualification of sets change because now each component of a set has to be originating, whereas before under NAFTA, if the classification of the set met the rules of origin, then it will qualify. And then the de minimis duty-free shipments threshold increased, $117 for Mexico, $150 Canadian dollar for Canada, and $800 for the United States. Here are some resources that you can use to know more about USMCA and the regulations and some of the conditions. So we're going to share this presentation later on with you, so you can have access to this information. Also, before I forget, if you have any questions or comments, you can put them on, and then at the end of the webinar, we're going to allow about 15 minutes to try to answer some of those, okay? Now, as far as the implementation issues, we're going to start with the automotive. This is also a refresher. We covered this in the past 2 webinars, but it's important to clarify or understand. As far as regional value content, the USMCA elevates this requirement to 75% regional value content, meaning US, Mexico, Canadian content, versus 62.5 that we have under NAFTA for automobiles and light duty trucks, as well as parts and components. Certain parts and components also had an increase in regional value contents. So again, an increase in regional value content for automobiles and auto parts. But then beyond this increase in regional value content, now we have additional requirements, which is, one of them is the aluminum and steel content, which now will require 70% of the steel aluminum purchases must be from North America that are used in the automobile. So that's a new requirement. Another situation or change that we have under the automotive rules is that there are certain components that before there was a list of components that you could bring from non-originating countries and not count as non-originating, which is now that was taken out. So everything coming in from non-originating countries or non-USMCA countries will be deemed as non-originating material. So that's they took out this list of components or materials. So this is gonna, eliminate some of the flexibility that some companies in the automotive sector have. But the other major change is that now we have a labor value content, which requires that vehicles have at least 40% to 45% content that must be produced by employees making an average of $16 per hour, obviously helping the playing field for U.S. manufacturers and workers. So again, the increase in regional value content, the steel aluminum content of 70%, and the labor value content of $16 per hour for 40 to 45% content of vehicles, depending if it's a light duty vehicle or truck or heavy duty truck. Now we have this into play. So in the implementation process has started with the automotive industry, and we're seeing some challenges in interpretation that we're going to see shortly. Just real quick, as a reminder, this is the regional value content increase is going to be phased in. So for the first year, we saw 66%, and now beginning July 1st, 2021, 69%, and so on until July 1st, 2023. That's when the 75% content will kick in. So there's some time, there's a gradual increase. And the same thing with the automotive and automotive parts. And here's where things are becoming a little bit more complicated. We have different tables that identify components and auto parts, and those have different percentage increases. Table A1, which we call the core parts, and it's engine, body, chassis, transmissions, etc. Those have a 75% content, and it's also gradual, the same as the automobiles, from 66% starting last year until July 1st, 2023, when the 75% will kick in. And then we have table A2, which are super core parts, and we'll explain that later because that's where the issue that we have right now is. Engine, transmissions, body, etc. Those have to be originating, the column 1 parts on the table A2 have to be originating in order for the vehicle to be originated. And table B, it's principal parts, pumps, compressors, air conditioners, etc. Those started with a 62.5% content, and they went up all the way to 70% on July 1st, 2023. Also, table C, the complementary parts, pipe hoses, locks, valves, harnesses, etc. They started with 62% on July 1st, 2020, and they're going to go all the way up to 65% on July 1st, 2023. Okay. There are some notes at the bottom, which in reality, the way we interpret this is that if they can meet the Annex 4B rule of origin via third shift, then they don't need to meet the percentage content. There are some exceptions, but in general terms, this is a provision that they still kept. So we'll evaluate that as we go along. If an automotive part is not under one of these tables, then the Annex 4B, the general rules of origin, will apply and will not be subject to the specific conditions under the provisions related to the product-specific rules of automotive goods. There was an annex that was created specifically for automotive rules that, for those of you that have read it or trying to read it, it's kind of complicated. And again, this is what's creating the big issues right now. Real quick, for the OEMs, the automotive assembly plants, they were given an opportunity to apply for what we call alternative staging regime, which gave them an additional 2 years until 2025 to comply with the rules of origin changes. They were able, if they applied and they were authorized to do so, which many did, now the regional body content stayed at 62.5 until June 30th. And they have other exemptions regarding the aluminum steel content and the labor value content. So they were able to waive or reduce some of those thresholds for another 2 years, so they can get their supply chain aligned with them as well. So, but again, this opportunity to have lower thresholds under the new rules of origin will expire on June 30th, 2025, and July 1st, 2025. That's when things are going to kick in 100% for everyone. Now, what's going on right now with the implementation of these rules? Well, after 1 year, there's been a disagreement in interpretation among the three countries. And in particular, the Mexican government has been very aggressive on this matter, not so much the Canadian, but the Mexican government. The US and Mexico have failed to resolve a dispute over the interpretation of USMCA automotive rules of origin, which are threatening the goal of boosting regional manufacturing under the USMCA. The conflict focuses on how to calculate the percentage of a vehicle that comes collectively from the three countries under the USMCA Mexico-Canada agreement. As per the US government, they insist that on a stricter way than Mexico and Canada believe they agree to for counting the origin of supercore parts under Table A2, which includes engines, transmission, and steering systems in the overall calculation, which makes it harder for plants in Mexico and Canada to meet the new threshold of the 75% content. I know this is confusing. I'm going to try to explain this in more general terms. But as an example, if a supercore part uses 75% regional content and thus qualifies under the requirement for duty-free treatment under its rule of origin, Mexico and Canada argue that the USMCA allows them to round up the number up to 100% for the purposes of meeting a second broader requirement for the vehicle regional value content. The US, however, does not want to permit the roundup or roll-up, making it tougher to reach the duty-free threshold for the complete vehicle. So in essence, if the component, the supercore component or part meets its rule of origin with the 75%, Mexico and Canada are saying it is originating, so it should be counted 100% as an originating part, so that when it transfers to the calculation of the vehicle, it will count as 100%. But the US has a different interpretation. Okay. And this is Table A2. And what components under Table A2, under column 1, they need to be originating for the vehicle to be originating. But Table 2 is split into 2 columns, which is the part, which is the supercore part, which is the engine. And the engine can be made up of head, blocks, crankshafts, pistons, etc., as well as transmissions and body and chassis. So they mentioned the components. So what Mexico is arguing is that if the engine itself meets the rule of origin with the 75% content, it doesn't matter where the head or the blocks or where those components come from, as long as the engine as a whole, as a super part, meets the 75% content. But it seems that the US saying, no, we want the column 2 parts to meet each one of them individually the 75% content in order for the engine to be originating. So that's the disagreement. It's a little bit complicated, but it has to do with again, the calculation of this core part, super core parts for the 75% content, and then to transfer that to the automobile. So this is the issue that is going on right now. So if they don't work this out and making it too complex for USMCA, this will cause automakers not to qualify for preferential treatment, and they will have to pay, the importation of vehicles will have to pay the 2.5% general duty rate or 25%, which is assigned for light duty trucks. And obviously, if they have to, if OEMs located in Canada and Mexico have to pay this duty rates, well, it's the USMCA for automotive purposes will become irrelevant to some degree. And so this is the big argument. And officially on August 20th, the Mexican government submitted a consultation request to the U.S. Trade Representative as per Article 31.4 of the USMCA to resolve the difference of interpretation. Obviously, this can take, they have 75 days to reply, but if not, then they create a panel. So this can drag along for, I will say, almost a year. However, hopefully, being optimistic, they'll get this ironed out pretty soon. So hopefully by the end of the year or sometime early in 2022, but we will see. So this is one of the things that now with the implementation that we're starting to see. Okay, so I know it's a little bit complicated, but I hope you can at least get the basic of what's going on regarding the implementation of the automotive rules. Another area that it's interesting now is the labor chapter. And right now, obviously, Chapter 23 is the labor chapter, which covers the labor provisions. I'm going to go real quick through this. It's new provisions that require the parties to take measures to prohibit produced by forced labor, to address violence against workers, exercising their labor rights, to address sex-based discrimination in the workplace, and to ensure that migrant workers are protected under labor law. So, so these are very specific mentioned in the labor chapter of USMCA, and also the issue of worker representation in collective bargaining in Mexico. Mexico committed to allow workers to engage in real collective bargaining and will require companies in Mexico to abide by the same basic labor principles that companies in the United States do. Obviously, Mexico enacted a labor reforms so that it can help in the implementation of these provisions. So including new independent institutions for registering unions and collective bargaining agreements and new impartial labor courts to adjudicate disputes. So I'm gonna, the labor chapter language was designated the U.S. Department of Labor to enforce it. I'm gonna skip to the last point here. Among the many responsibilities of the committee, it will receive and review submissions on the USMCA labor chapter and rapid response labor mechanisms. And that's what I want to focus on, the rapid response labor mechanism. Some of the key points of the facility-specific rapid response labor mechanisms is that the facility-specific rapid response labor mechanisms in the USMCA establishes an entirely new streamlined approach to labor dispute settlements in free trade agreements, under which an ad hoc international dispute settlement panel can make a determination as to whether a specific facility is complying with local Mexican labor law. The RRLM allows for the US and Canada to request, based on a good faith belief, the remediation of a specific denial of rights under the Mexican labor law occurring as under a cover facility in Mexico. Mexico can also bring claims, but against the US and Canada, but with more limited scope. Under the RRLM's streamlined dispute process, the US and Canada can suspend, and this is very important, can suspend preferential tariff treatment, suspend liquidation, and or block entry of goods from not compliant facilities in as little as 120 days after initiating the dispute. So this is critical. These disputes need to be resolved, because if not, it can have a very negative impact on trade of goods from these facilities. So Mexican companies, particularly those in the aerospace, auto and auto parts, cosmetics, industrial baked goods, steel, aluminum, glass, pottery, plastics, forging, cement, and mining sectors are the most vulnerable and must be prepared to confront legal challenges related to the implementation of Mexican labor law. So it is going to become a challenge, and we already had 2 tests of this already within 1 year. there's been 2 tests of this rapid response labor mechanisms. The first one that we had was Tridonics. In this particular case, it's a plant out of Matamoros. The AFL-LCO, the largest U.S. labor federation, filed a labor complaint alleging that for the past 2 years, Tridonics plant workers had not been allowed to organize with an independent union, Sindicato Nacional Independiente de Trabajadores de Industrias y Servicios, Movimiento 2032, SNITIS, in place of a company-controlled union, or to ratify a collective bargaining agreement. Some of us in the region might remember that there's an attorney from the El Paso area that went to Matamoros and started, making this allegations or going to plants and trying to align those workers with her, and by putting different complaints to different plants with the objective to try to get away from company-controlled unions. So I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but it started with this, okay? The U.S. parent company of Tridonics, it's Cardone Industries, they agreed to recognize worker rights and pay back wages to laid off employees to settle the labor right complaint following the USMCA. So yeah, that complaint generated some conflicts, and to avoid any disruptions, the corporate office agreed to settle this. So they agreed to pay severance and 6 months back of back pay to at least 154 workers who the AFL-CIO said were wrongly dismissed from the plant over labor issues. So the back pay totaled more than $600,000, or an average $4,000 per worker. The agreement also will allow workers to select their own union representative, which can be this union that we mentioned earlier that is headed by this lady, among other provisions. Also, they have provisions about training, management training on legal labor laws, better COVID-19 provisions, and other provisions. But the key is the back pay and the allowance of the workers to select their own union representation, whereas they were under company union. Okay. The second test that we had under this was the GMC Lao facility. Again, a confidential tip earlier this year alerted the U.S. Trade Representative and the U.S. Labor Department to potential violations of worker protection at the GM plant in Silao during a collective bargaining agreement voting. Supposedly, they were voting on a new agreement, and the workers were coerced and forced to vote a certain way, and voter fraud and other provisions. So the U.S. government asked the Mexican government to investigate the concerns over voter interference, but the Mexican government already began probing some of those concerns about the voting irregularities. In media reports that, like I said, there were ballots that were destroyed, et cetera, with fraud. So this is more of a employee coercion or threatening to vote under a new agreement, bargaining agreement. So there was the resolution agreement required that or allowed for a new vote before August 20th, 21, with federal inspectors and other international observers, and even the Mexico National Electoral Institute, which is the IFE, will be supervising this election. And as an update here, the vote was held on August 19, 2021, well, a few days ago, and the workers voted to scrap their collective contract that they had, opening the door for them to oust one of Mexico's largest labor union organizations, which is the Confederación, under a new deal that they're going to have later on, which is the Confederación of Mexican Workers, the CTM. So if you see both the situations that have happened, we see that the FAL-CIO is heavily involved. We see that this attorney from El Paso had a lot to do with what happened in Matamoros. because there are new unions being created in Mexico. And some of those unions are more leaning towards the current government, the Morena affiliations. And whereas the CTMs and other unions were more with the PRI and the PAN. Again, I don't want to get into politics, but just you can read, what's behind. It's votes. Okay. So there are concerns, particularly in Mexico, regarding the labor chapter on the USMCA. The United States will have the right of monitoring and ensuring the labor chapter provisions are fully implemented, and this can be seen as a political interference. Another issue is that it's putting pressure in wages. We now have the labor value content of $16. So maybe some of the plants that are in the automotive industry, because of union contracts and requirements, might be obligated to start paying those high salaries. But the last thing is this one, the aggressiveness of the implementation of the labor chapter might increase under the Biden administration. Again, the labor chapter was key for Democrats to vote for USMCA. This is where President Trump had to somewhat cave in so that Democrats will vote. So it's going to be interesting as we start to see. We already have two challenges or two tests of this, and the U.S. unions are heavily vested in this. So it can create a political conflict. So we need to monitor this closely. But hopefully, this will create better conditions in Mexico, which is the goal for workers. But let's see what happens from the political aspect of things. Okay. Now we're going to talk about energy. There's no chapter in USMCA only for energy. There are several provisions around that kind of protect or touch on energy issues, but we're going to talk about some of the things that are happening and are being an issue. Right now, I'm going to start with just mentioning, and this is based out of the USMCA fact sheet put out by the U.S. Trade Representative Office regarding, the importance of energy in USMCA and among the two countries. North American trade in energy products is significantly and growing. The USMCA provides a predictable framework for the United States, Mexico, and Canada to continue expanding this trade, which has been marked by rapidly increasing U.S. exports. This is good for the U.S. energy industry, associated sectors of the U.S. economy, and their workers. Likewise, this growing trade will bolster North American competitiveness and help lower our reliance on energy imports from outside the region. Some of the provisions are zero tariffs on energy products. So this maintains a free flow of energy across the borders in North America with a zero tariff treatment of exports to Canada and Mexico. Locks in Mexican historic energy reform. This is interesting. It is mentioned here. Locks in for the U.S. investors, service suppliers, and other companies the benefits of Mexican historic 2013 energy reforms. Facilitates the movement of hydrocarbons by pipeline. This fixes an issue that we had in the past, the flow of hydrocarbons through pipelines. They're originating, even if they have diluents, as long as they're not more than 40% of the volume of the crude. So this will give us flexibility from that angle. Certification requirements for oil and gas, provides new flexibilities and rules of origin certification requirements between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and streamline regulatory processes for U.S. liquefied natural gas exports to Mexico and Canada, which will continue to receive automatic export approvals without having to get authorizations like with other countries. Okay, so these are the provisions that we have that supposedly USMCA will allow for energy purposes. And like I mentioned, there's no specific chapter for energy, but there are some chapters that are interesting. For example, Chapter 8 mentions the following, and I'm going to read the last two. Mexico reserves its sovereign right to reform its constitution and domestic legislation and Mexico has the direct, inalienable, and prescriptive ownership of all hydrocarbons in the subsoil of the national territory, including the continental shelf and the exclusive economic zone located outside the territorial sea and adjacent thereto in strata of deposits, regardless of the physical condition, pursuant to the Mexican Constitution. So this chapter is telling us that Mexico has 100% rights and ownership of its energy resources, sovereignty. Okay, and then Article 32.11 of Chapter 32 mentions about different chapters. For example, 14 on investment, 15 on cross-border, and Chapter 22, state-owned enterprises. Here mentions that Mexico reserves the right to adopt and maintain a measure with respect to a sector or subsector for which Mexico has not taken specific reservations in the schedules of Annex 1, 2, and 4, only to the extent with the least restrictive measures that Mexico may adopt or maintain under the terms of applicable reservations and exceptions to parallel obligations and other trade and investment agreements that Mexico has ratified prior to the entry of force of this agreement, including with the World Trade Organization agreements, without regard to whether those agreements have entered into force. Basically, what it's saying is that Mexico will respect whatever was agreed upon before USMCA with other agreements. So that, this article and mentioned in the different chapters kind of gives some protection to foreign investments regarding energy. So that's pretty much, on one side, we have, Mexico owns energy, all the energy, hydrocarbons, etc. But also they have to respect whatever was agreed before the implementation of the USMCA. Now, as mentioned earlier, in 2013, Mexico amended its constitution, opening its oil and gas sector to foreign and private investments, including with respect to entering into joint ventures agreement with Pemex. Obviously, this was done under Peña Nieto's administration. And obviously, it's allowed, for foreign companies to come and invest in Mexico, opening up the oil industry in Mexico. So this was great. And when USMCA was being negotiated, we were all optimistic. That's why they probably said, we don't need a specific chapter, just some protective and clarification in the provisions in the USMCA. But obviously, a new administration came on board, which is López Obrador's administration, Morena, the Fourth Transformation, 4T. And now, since they have been in power, they started to implement a series of actions, measures, and policies designed to preserve and increase the market share of Pemex, a Mexican national oil company, obviously, and of the CFE, the Mexican state-owned power utility. So on the side, the López Obrador administration has started to implement things that are kind of making things interesting and less attractive for foreign investment, and also limiting foreign investment. So this goes against the USMCA spirit. So these developments have raised questions about the status of the energy reforms going forward, and triggered concerns among foreign investors about the protections afforded for such investments. Also, the Mexican Ministry of Energy, SENER, and SENACE, the operator of the Mexican power grid, have adopted several measures affecting sponsors of solar and wind power generations. Well, some of us have read in the news and seen on TV, on the news, and other articles that the Mexican government that is sitting right now is not for solar and wind energy, renewable energies. They want to stick to oil and gas and electricity with coal plants. So they're not incentivizing or encouraging investments in those alternative energies, which goes against what's going on globally, okay? So these measures could have a disproportionate effect on the operations of private and renewable energy projects, okay? So this is what's going on in Mexico that is of concern. And there was a letter in January issued to President Trump But also there was a second letter issued to President Biden by several members of Congress dated July 20th, 2021, in which they expressed their concern about AMLO's actions regarding energy policies in Mexico that go against the spirit and letter of USMCA. And the members of Congress are bipartisan. So this is a bipartisan effort. Obviously, I'm going to read some of the sections of the letter. On February 1st, 2021, President López Obrador introduced legislation to reform the power industry law, which quickly passed the Mexican legislature. This reform gives dispatch preference to CFEs, less efficient and more polluting power generating plants, which are coal plants. It also removes competition in the country's energy sector, negatively impacting the U.S. investments, and will increase the cost for Mexican consumers and manufacturers. And it is estimated to significantly raise CO2 levels by 20% and SO2 levels by 150% in its emissions. The increase in energy costs in Mexico will impact regional value chains, reduce North American competitiveness at the time when the U.S. government and American companies are focusing all their efforts in economic recovery. President López Obrador also shepherded an equally concerning piece of legislation to Congress in March of this year, the hydrocarbon law reform. This measure gives the Mexican government the right to exercise discretionary control over the distribution, storage, import, and export of fuels and oil, and the ability to suspend and revoke permits across the fuel value chain to unduly favor Pemex. So this is very concerning because this new law kind of, cancels or can cancel a lot of the contracts and agreements that foreign investors had with the Mexican government in regards to oil and gas stations, and et cetera. The Mexican Congress of the Union also passed new legislation eliminating Pemex asymmetric regulation, which forced Pemex to publish retail prices while the private sector gained at least 30% market share. This temporary regulation was critical to facilitate the transition from a monopoly to open fuels market, which was one of the goals of the reform of 2013 by Peña Nieto, move from a monopoly to open markets. So obviously here, they're asking President Biden to address his violations when engaging in diplomatic discussions with President López Obrador. This is necessary not only to establish a level playing field for U.S. companies operating in Mexico, but also to allow for competition in the energy market that will protect American jobs and drive down consumer costs and greenhouse gas emissions. So as you can see, there are concerns regarding energy, regarding USMCA. There are concerns for the lack of interest in promotion of alternative green energies in Mexico. And Mexico is reviving its oil industry, Pemex, and electric service company, CFE. So we can expect that a lot of resources, regulations will be devoted to this effort so that they can go back and control what regarding oil industry and electric services. And this goes in hand with the next comment, which is there are concerns of Mexico limiting contracts for oil and electricity projects to state-owned entities or a limited number of companies. So again, USMCA, along with the 2013 energy reform, everyone was optimistic that foreign investment and open markets were going to come. But now with the new administration, well, since 2018 with AMLO, things are changing. So this obviously can negatively impact current and future foreign investments in Mexico's energy sector. So very interesting. So, this is something that we have to be monitoring and looking at carefully. Now, the next topic is country of origin marking. And this is a little bit more technical and from a customs compliance standpoint. So I'm going to try to be as general as possible with my comments and explanation. So bear with me for a little bit on this topic, but it is very important, as we're going to see at the end. Right now, CBP published proposed rule regulations, which will expand the use of the marking rules under 19 CFR 102, which will also allow the determination of country of origin for non-preferential treatment or country determinations. 19 CFR 102, pretty much it's to define the country of origin for products made in Canada or Mexico, but mainly for preferential treatment purposes. Now, U.S. Customs, it wants this regulation to apply also to any product made in Mexico or Canada that is imported to the United States. So this expansion is significant change from the current rules for determining country of origin for non-preferential situations and could really streamline and give more certainty to importers. We're looking at the final rule, which probably will happen the later part of this year. In the meantime, we have to calculate or define the country of origin for products made in Mexico and Canada when imported to the US, applying the marking rules under 19 CFR 102, which are based on transformation via tariff shift and reviewing the value contents, and also the marking rules under 19 CFR 134, which are the general marking provisions, which are based more on substantial transformation. And again, like mentioned earlier, this proposed rule, it will be favorable to importers because it will alleviate a lot of the confusion and lack of uniformity within both regulations for non-preferential country of origin. So in general terms, the 19 CFR 102 regulations are based on tariff shift provisions, whereas the 19 CFR are based on substantial transformation. So 19 CFR is what we call codified substantial transformation. We now have specific rules that will tell us how a product, we can define the country of origin of a product with very specific rules by tariff codes, by tariff classifications. Instead of 134, which is more general substantial transformation, which is subject to interpretation by the customs authorities. So again, if 102 it's used for non-preferential treatment, this will give us more certainty as well. In most cases, the country of origin under 19 CFR 102 and 19 CFR 134 will give you the same result, will give you the same country of origin, but there are cases that it does not. And this has become very relevant in recent times when the implementation of Section 301 tariffs, which requires importers to use the 134 rules, substantial transformation for products that are imported from Mexico or Canada. So in other words, if a product that is produced in Mexico or Canada contains Chinese origin components or subassemblies, customs has held in many instances that the product is Chinese because it did not meet a substantial transformation in Mexico or Canada. So because of that, then the Section 301 tariffs will apply. Now, it might well be that a product might qualify for USMCA preferential treatment, and under the USMCA marking rules is Mexico, but because of the inclusion of Chinese components, it might be still subject to Section 301 tariffs because we have to go and apply the substantial transformation rule. I know it's a little bit complicated, but believe me, there are many companies suffering because of this. If this rule goes into effect, or when it goes into effect, it is important for companies to review the country of origin determination because there can be changes. So now with applying 19 CFR 102, the country of origin might change. For example, if the product that formerly did not undergo a substantial transformation in a USMCA country and was found to be of Chinese origin for duty purposes, now with the implementation of 19 CFR 102 as the only way to define country of origin for US or products from Mexico and Canada, then it might have now a Mexican country of origin. So now, rather than going to a substantial transformation analysis, which can be very complicated and subject to interpretation, is very subjective. Now, we can go and look at the tariff shift, regional value content provisions under 19 CFR 102. And this could have an effect in eliminating certain duties such as Section 301 tariffs, and just have one country of origin for both marking and non-preferential treatment. So this is going to become very important because it might alleviate some of the headaches that some companies are going through right now. We're going to have one set of rules for Mexico and Canadian products imported to the United States for preferential and non-preferential treatment. Okay, so we'll keep you posted on this. Hopefully, we'll see this proposed rule go into effect soon. So just keep an eye on this. Okay, thank you. So as far as what to expect in the fourth quarter and beyond, looking at 2022, well, we already see that the rules of origin are becoming an issue. We have a dispute on the automotive rules that's creating friction. Hopefully, this will be resolved soon. It probably won't be into 2022, but now that USMCA is getting traction and people are starting to analyze the rules in more detail and testing the rules, we're now seeing this discrepancy. So hopefully we won't have many, but we can expect to have differences in interpretation, not only from a government standpoint, but also from the trade community standpoint. So we'll see how this transpires, but we have to keep an eye on this. Again, for the automotive industry, because of the change of the drastic change in the rules of origin for the automotive industry, the OEMs were given this extra time, 2 years, to adapt. So this is giving us a little bit of breathing room, but for planning purposes and supply chain planning purposes, 2025 is around the corner. One positive thing that we can expect is companies will continue relocating to North America to comply, obviously, with the USMCA requirements, particularly in the automotive sector and in the pharmaceutical and medical device industries. There are more flexible rules of origin, so for this industries, so that's an incentive. And also, we're going to talk later because of the COVID-19 supply chain impact. So it will be interesting. And also, we still have the Section 301 tariffs for China. So a lot of companies want to shift production to North America to avoid these tariffs. And now with these change in the marking rules, this might become an advantage as well. As we have seen, we expect to continue to see an increase in U.S.-Mexico cross-border trade in 2021 and beyond with the economic recovery. Now that the USMCA is in place for over a year, we're starting to see enforcement from CBP regarding verification of origin. So be ready with the proper internal process procedures and documentation to manage and comply with the USMCA requirements. So this is a key area for those involved in trade and importing products, applying preferential treatment. Be ready to comply with verifications of origin. And lastly, continue to monitor labor and energy issues as they might have an impact on the entire USMCA for future renegotiations and updates. So as we saw, the labor and energy, besides trade, are having impact, or we're starting to see issues regarding those two sectors as well. Okay, so that's all I have for USMCA. So let's start with the next section, which is the COVID-19 impact on trade. In the last webinar that I gave, I provided a lot of statistical information regarding COVID cases, how it transpired, and etc. Now I want to focus more on the recovery and what challenges we have. So the U.S. economy in GDP's standpoint increased at an annual rate of 6.5% in the second quarter of 2021 compared to 6.3% during the first quarter of 2021. So we saw a slight increase. Okay, the increase in the second quarter is basically reflected because of the continued economic recovery, the reopening of establishments, of restaurants and stores, etc., and the continued government response related to COVID-19 assistance payments in the form of loan to businesses, the PPPs, etc., and grants to state and local governments increase as well. While social benefits to households, such as direct economic payments, have declined. Obviously, those were given last year. We're still seeing some of that in unemployment and child tax credits, but the big chunk was done last year. Some statistics, trade statistics that we can see here based on CBP's information. As far as importation of goods into the United States, for fiscal year 2020, we had 2.42 trillion of value of import goods. For 2021, as of April 30th, 2021, we have 1.78 trillion. If we analyze this, it will be over $3 trillion. So this shows an increase in imports from 2020. And the fiscal year for the government is October 1st through September 30th. So it's a different fiscal year, but they base this on their fiscal years. Duty collected, well, on 2020, they collected $78.8 billion. And in 2021, as of April 30th, 58 billion. If we analyze that, it will be close to $100 billion. So we also see an increase. Total entry summaries, that's for my custom broker friends. We had in 2020, 32.8 million entries. And so far in 2021, as of April 30th, 24 million, which annualized 41.1. So we're also going to see an increase this year. And an interesting item here is the minimums rule, which is the type 86 entries for section 321 or shipments under $800. U.S. Customs has a new entry type, which is type 86, which now imports can be done through this entry type 86 if they're below $800. So this, in 2020, we had 768 million of these entries. And in 2021, so far as of April 30th, 530 million, which if we analyze it, it will be around 909 million entries. So compared to the regular transactions for trucks, ocean containers, rail, and air freight, this type 86 entries, the threshold of $800, section 221, it's outrageous. It's out of bounds. It's incredible. And us that are in the brokerage industry and in the importing sector, we are seeing that a lot of the delays that are caused in the A system, it's being supposedly, from what I understand, is because of the saturation of these type 86 entries. So as we know, there's been delays in processing entries, and a lot has to do with the saturation of this type 86 entries. But it's interesting information that you can have. So as far as collections, as of August 18, 2021, from Trade Remedies, Section 321 has collected, or the CBP has collected $101 billion so far of Section 321 tariffs since it was implemented in 2019. Section 301 for European goods, 1.11 billion. Section 232 for steel, 8.5 billion. Section 232 aluminum, 2.6 billion. And Section 201 for washing machines, washing machine parts, and solar panels, $2.87 billion. So they're pretty high numbers. So it's interesting, especially in Section 301 from China, if we're going to see an end to this. We're going to talk about it later, but look at the amount of money they're being collected. So interesting. U.S.-Mexico trade statistics. In exports from the U.S. to Mexico in 2020, 211.5 billion. So far, for the first half of the year, this is calendar year, January to December. For the first half of the year, 133.5, which analyzed will be around 267 billion. So we'll see an increase in exports into Mexico from the U.S. Imports from Mexico so far as of the June 30th, I'm sorry, 2020, 325.2 billion. And as of June 30th in 2021, 186.4 billion. If we analyze it, it would be 372.8 billion analyzed. So we also see an increase here. Now, the top two trading partners as of for 2021, as of June 30th. Obviously, Mexico is number one with a total trade of 220 billion, which is a 14.7% of the total trade activity in the United States. Canada comes second, 317.1, 14.6, not very close to Mexico. And then we have China with 300.7 billion in total trade, which comes around 13.8. But if you look at China, look at the exports from the US to China, 71.1 billion. Very low exports from the US to China. Most of them are soybeans and agricultural commodities. But look at the imports from China. They beat Mexico and Canada in a heartbeat, $229.6 billion of imports. So it's kind of out of whack, but it's because of the exports to China. So all countries are close to the 14% range. So things can change any moment here, but still Mexico, as of now, it's the top trading partner with the United States, but just keep an eye on this, okay? Now, there's something that I want to mention about a very interesting tool and very useful tool that the World Trade Organization has developed, which is the Good Trades Barometer. And this is a composite leading indicator providing real-time information of the trajectory of merchandise trade relative to the recent trends and ahead of the conventional trade volume statistics. So it's a barometer, it's a measure, it's a gauge for us to see where we're headed. So as far as the later barometer reading, which was on the 18th of August, the reading was 110.4, which is the highest on record since the indicator was released in 2016, and up more than 20 points year to year. This rise in the barometer reflects both the strength and current trade expansions and the depth of the pandemic-induced shock in 2020. So it is notable that while still well above the trend, obviously it increased from last year because of the pandemic. So we have started to see a decreased rate in the rise of the barometer, which could presage a peaking of upward momentum in trade. So yeah, obviously compared to 2020 up to now, it's been pretty steep, but we're seeing a normalization already. Not that it's going down, but more normal trend. All of the components of the barometer indices were above trend last month, illustrating that the broad base of the recovery. Air freight was 114 points, container was 110.8, and raw materials trade 104.7. They continue to rise a little bit faster, seemingly faster growth. The automotive product index also rose to 106.6, despite that we have issues in that the car production and sales are falling due to the shortage of semiconductors. And this shortage is also reflected in a small decline in electronic components. So the shortage of semiconductors didn't impact the automotive sector that much, but it is impacting the electronic component sector. The forward-looking new export index, which is at 109.3 on the last reading, has slowed more definitely, providing further indication that the pace of recovery is likely to decelerate in the near term. The rise in air freight index reflects rebounds in air freight transportation because of the easing in the pandemic restrictions, mainly in developed countries. But it can come down if we start seeing new reimposition of restrictions due to COVID-19 with the new variant. So again, COVID is becoming a factor. If anything will stop or make the economic recovery slower, I think it will be COVID that will be creating this. And again, the latest reading is broadly consistent with the World Trade Organization's most recent trade forecast, which foresaw an 8% increase in the volume of world merchandise trade in 2021, following 5.3 drop in 2020. So it dropped in 5.3 in 2020, and now we're seeing an annualized increase of 8%. Global goods has grown steadily since it registered a sharp decline in the second quarter of 2020 during the early days of the pandemic. And the volume of merchandise trade was up 5.7% year to year until the first quarter of 2021, the largest jump since the 5.8 rise in the third quarter of 2011. So this is a big increase compared to the last one compared to 2011, which was 5.8. This last reading also suggests that goods and trade will see an even larger year-to-year increase in the second quarter once trade volume data for that period is available. So the outlook for world trade continues to be overshadowed by downside risks, including regional disparities, weakness in services and trade, and the lagging vaccination timetables, particularly in poor countries. COVID-19 continues to pose the greatest threat to the outlook for trade, as new waves of infection could easily undermine recovery. So things are going fairly good in regards to trade. However, COVID-19 might become an issue again. So we'll just have to keep an eye on this. So, but very interesting information, some statistics, some numbers, so you can see, and that will give you an idea of what we're going through right now. Another area, before we take a break, I'm going to briefly mention this. It's the containers issues. Price to ship containers from Asia to the US and Europe are rising historically as cargo owners bid up rates in search for ocean transportation capacity that the shipping industry executives expect to remain tight for the rest of the year. And we expect this to keep happening most of 2022. And this piece of information is very interesting, to say the least. The average price to ship a 40-foot container has more than quadrupled from a year ago to $8,399 as of July 1st. This is an increase from 53.5% since the first week of May. But, you know, this is a worldwide average, but to ship from China to major ports in Europe and the US West Coast, those are closer to $12,000 per container. And some companies say they're being charged $20,000 per container for last minute agreements. I was talking to a customer yesterday and they told me that they're seeing rates getting close to $30,000 per container. So this is incredible. I mean, I've never seen this before. But again, you know, it's a global situation that we have right now. And what's going on? Well, shipping experts say that the rising ocean rates are the result of disruptions across supply chains that trigger delays at ports and inland distribution networks as Western retailers and manufacturers rush to restock inventories that were depleted during the pandemic. So all this economic recovery and all the replenishment started moving, especially from Asia into North America and Europe. So there's a big influx of containers coming in. So this is what's creating mainly the increase, the supply and demand, pretty much. Supply chain experts say that the high rates leave many shippers, particularly those with relatively low value goods, facing a choice. They can pay the prices and try to pass the cost to the consumers, or retreat from overseas markets. Again, there's no short-term solution to this, so expect these high prices for the remainder of 2021 and well into 2022. So again, the cost of the containers are going to be with us. The high cost for ocean shipments will be with us for a little while, and this will take us to the next information that I want to share, which I'm going to continue with this. We're going to take a short break, and so that our other sponsors can provide the information on the companies. So with that, I'll stop for about 15 minutes so they can share their company information, which is CIC and AUTOMOTIVE.
Hello, thank you, Jorge. I'm sharing the screen. Not sure if you're looking at it right now.
Yes.
Right. So thank you very much, Jorge. Good morning to everyone. I want to thank the NEDC staff, Mr. Keith, Rolf, Felicia, Griselda, Mike, Janie, Susie, and Jorge Torres for organizing this webinar, as well as giving our firm the opportunity to introduce ourselves and briefly talk about the services we offer. We talk a little bit about us. I would like to start by mentioning that CIC has a strategic alliance with Interlink, basically for trade consulting services. It is important to notice that we are focused on IMEX companies located in Mexico, and we do business with the US corporations in order to bring stability and certainty in their import-export transactions of their facilities that are located in Mexico. We basically, throughout the services we provide, we analyze and evaluate the risk of the import-export operations in order to ensure best practices, reliability, and compliance. Mike, not sure if you can help me out. I'm trying to turn the video on, but the system is not letting me.
What, you're trying to display a video?
Yep. Well, no problem, Mike. I'm gonna continue with this. Talking about our history, let me tell you that our goal is to ensure stability for our customers, as we have successfully done across a variety of industries. So far, we've worked with more than 300 customers in the implementation of foreign trade project. Basically, we touch all type of industries from chemical, plastic, metal, medical. Now, about our value proposition, I'm gonna read these four main topics because they're extremely important. What's basically what we focus on? Foreign trade compliance for your import-export transactions in Mexico. Also, as we've seen in the previous slide, because we have worked with many companies in different industries, we've gained extremely valuable cross-industry experience. Also, even though we manage some projects in order
Can you hear us?
Javier, are you there?
of strategies that bring stability to your company. Talking about our team of experts, we have an extremely experienced team of auditors, consultants, and executives. We basically gather them so that you can focus on manufacturing and leave the rest in our hands. Let me talk to you briefly about the services that we handle. I'm going to start with the audit services. Basically, our audit services reduce the level of risk and operating costs in your foreign trade transactions. What type of audits do we perform? It's basically physical, electronic, and digital files in all your foreign trade and customs transactions. We check your Annex 24, which is the trade compliance inventory control system that your company uses. We check fixed assets. We even review your OEA certification and your CITIPAD program. There's another service, the monthly monitoring. Basically, our monthly compliance monitoring service seeks for customs discrepancies that prevent or mitigate an impact on taxes, duties, and inventories. For this particular service, there is a slogan that we use that says, at CIC, we are part of your work team. It really stands out, this slogan, for this particular service. Now, what do we monitor in this service? Well, the Annex 24, the Annex 31, all your customs operations, and your IMEX customs compliance. What about systems conciliations? Well, our inventory conciliation services help IMEX companies comply with Annex 24 and Annex 31. We even review your physical inventory regarding machinery and equipment so that your trade compliance transactions are compliant with Mexican regulations. Regarding certifications and programs, we help IMEX companies to get the required certifications that will speed up value-added tax refund and accelerate the flow of goods and safety across the border. What type of certifications we help? Well, it's the value-added tax and yet certification, the OEA certification, and the CITIPAD program. About legal advice, we advise and represent the IMEX clients before Mexican authorities that regulate customs compliance. What type of services that we handle? Well, we check customs risk assessment. There's a specific services where some companies have a lot of doubts on how to be prepared for such visits. It is the support for on-site visits that are conducted by the Mexican authority. So you can check these services and review which one applies to your company. About training and development, you can either join us at one of our workshops or request a tailored one for your personnel. We train your import-export, customs, and administrative personnel to ensure your IMEX company is fully compliant at all times. This is just like the summary of the services that we provide. So you can take a look at them. Either way, we're gonna share this information with MEDC staff. So in case you need it, they can provide them to you. And finally, well, thank you for your time. You can see our contact information in the screen, and we look forward to work with your IMEX companies in Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. Now, Melissa, we got Omar.
Thank you so much, Jorge. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me. Okay, can you see my screen just so?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Mendoza. I'm the sales executive for AUTOMOTIVE Airlines here in McAllen. I'd first like to thank all of McAllen EDC staff for putting this together and for the opportunity to present in front of all of you and share a little bit of information about AUTOMOTIVE and its services. We're going to watch a brief video just so that you can see a little bit about AUTOMOTIVE. Now, this is just a brief history of AUTOMOTIVE. We've been around, as you saw in the video, for over 33 years. In 2017, we did a renovation to our fleet. So all our aircrafts are about 3 or 4 years old. They're very new aircrafts. They're of French-Italian origin. So in one of the videos that you'll see that we have 2 seats on each side, which is very spacious. You don't have to worry about that middle seat. We have 19 national and 2 international destinations, 16 of those being exclusive routes. We have more than 70 domestic and international flights daily, and we've transported over 700,000 passengers per year. The next video that you're going to see is going to be just about how our aircraft is built. A lot of the times people don't really know about that stuff. And so it's really interesting. So hopefully, if you like aviation as much as we do, you'll take some interest in it. So bear with me. Now, this is just a few of our benefits when traveling with Automar. We do have courtesy service on board, so snacks, drinks, whether it's a soda, a water, or even an alcoholic beverage, they are courtesy to all our passengers, regardless of the rate that you paid. So sometimes you get nervous, you can have a beer, or if you don't like drinking, feel free to have a soda. You are allowed to get your seat selection as well. Every single rate that we offer has included the carry-on luggage of 10 kilos, which is 22 pounds. Some of our rates do include a check bag of 23 kilos, which is 50 pounds, as well as access to the Aramar Lounge in Mexico City. In the lounge, you'll find Wi-Fi, snacks, drinks, TV. It's basically an area where in case you have to do some work before you get back home, feel free to stop there. We also have the advantage to advance your flight the same day if it's available and there's availability on that flight. We've also improved our service on board. So whenever you're traveling back into the US, you'll also receive a sandwich along with your soda and or chips, with your chips as well. One of the benefits of flying with Automat is that we have an agreement with United. So you're able to accumulate miles with the Mileage Plus program. Just make sure that when you're doing your check-in at the counter, you notify us of your frequent traveler number so that we can add that to your reservation. This is the Aramar route map. As you can tell, we have direct flights, nonstop flights to Monterrey, Mexico City, and now Guadalajara. From Monterrey, you can connect to Torreón, San Luis Potosí, Aguascalientes, and from Guadalajara, you can connect to Puerto Vallarta, as well as Mazatlan. Now, from Mexico City itself, well, you have a lot of different beaches to travel to, Puerto Escondido, Acapulco, Veracruz, and a lot of other ones as well. I'm sorry. Now, this is what I was stating earlier. We do have 3 tiers when it comes to our rates. We have the save tier. So as long as you say, you know what, I don't need a check in a bag, I just need my carry-on, I would recommend that tier. Then if you say, you know what, I do need a carry-on and you need a check-in bag, so then you would go to benefits. But if you want to not worry about anything and have total flexibility, then all-inclusive would be for you. And just a quick reminder before I finish my presentation is that there is a negative COVID test requirement in order to re-enter the US as per CDC requirements. This is applicable to all passengers over the age of 2, and it has to be less than 72 hours prior to your departure. So if you have any further questions about this, feel free to let me know. I'm gonna share my contact info here at the very end. Once again, thank you, McAllen EDC, for this opportunity. And hopefully you'll keep Automat in mind for your travel needs. Like Keith said, we'll be doing a raffle at the very end. So hopefully 2 of you will have the opportunity to fly out with us in the near future to any of our destinations, paying just the tax and fees of our flight. And good luck to you all. Thank you once again, McAllen EDC, and back to Jorge for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so let's move on with the presentation. We have a half an hour, and then we're going to have some Q&A afterwards and the raffle. Quick comment, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A section, not in the chat. That will make it easier for us to answer them. So again, going back to the presentation, we're talking about the impact of COVID in trade. And we saw, some statistics that, yeah, we've seen a growth in the economies and in trade. Obviously, we're still monitoring, and we have to be careful with COVID. We also saw, the big impact on containers and the increase in their cost. So all that is making us rethink, what do we need to do to mitigate, obviously, the impact of a pandemic like the one we had in the supply chain, and obviously to mitigate some of the increases in costs as a result of the pandemic and other factors. So there's some information that I gather, which seems interesting. It's the, with COVID, it's proving that we need a more resilient supply chain. And we need to keep monitoring suppliers 24/7. Also, dual sourcing is critical, at least dual sourcing. Source from 2 suppliers, 75%, 25%, rather than 1. So you can have options in case contingency plans, in case someone fails because of supply chain issues, etc. Also map your suppliers, manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution sites to ensure that they're not in the same region. That way, if one region is impacted and not another one, you can shift your supply chain. And identify the tier 2 and tier 1 suppliers used for critical parts of material, and work with sole source suppliers to develop alternate sources. And obviously identify and monitor sub-tier suppliers. So, going back here is to have contingency plans, more suppliers of the same commodity, geographically located in different areas, so you can react if there's issues there. So that's one thing that can be done. The other one is it's more of a recommendation or a study that is being made, is what they call the Pan American manufacturing ecosystem, which is more of a regionalization of the supply chain, and it's to strengthen the training partnerships with countries in North America, Central America, and South America. Find low-cost suppliers here rather than Asia, and build a reliable, cost-effective land-based transportation network, which will result in jobs, promoting political stability with countries in the American, and slow migration to the United States. Yes, this might become a little bit more political, but it might make some sense now more than ever, trying to promote supply chain and suppliers in the Americas, bring jobs to Central America, South America. I know it's complicated moving the supply chain. It can take some time, develop suppliers, there's quality issues, raw material issues, etc. But it's something to consider and to look at, because again, having a pandemic like the one that we still have to a certain degree, is creating issues in the supply chain, and which translate to increased costs. So I just wanted to mention this so you can have in mind. So with that, we're going to shift to trade policy under the new administration. And there's not much change from what we discussed the last time. Obviously, the focus of the US government right now, it's been in place for a little bit over 8 months. And there was a transition period, and COVID, the economy, and now there's other issues that they're having to fix or take care of. So in reality, trade, I don't want to say it's not a priority, but it's not really right now that important, in the sense that they have to take care of these other issues that we know are going on. So, but still, we do have some information regarding where we're headed with the Biden administration in regards to trade. So there was a comment made by Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor for President Biden, that says trade policy should involve a laser focus on what improves wages and creates high-paying jobs, rather than making the world safe for corporate investment. So this is a shift, obviously. Now the focus is on wages and the workers, okay, rather than protecting or incentivizing the big corporations. So the Biden administration it's having its hands full with some of the trade issues that were left behind. As we know, Trump was very active with trade, with all the different Section 321, Section 201, Section 232s, all the different, I don't want to say trade wars, but all the different things that he put in place, and also the threatening of getting out of the World Trade Organization, and the USMCA, how it came about. So, yeah, the Trump administration left some things out there, but so far they have pretty much left untouched to a certain degree. So, so we haven't seen any major traction regarding those issues that were left behind. Like I mentioned here, in general terms, we have not seen much action this year in regards to trade issues, because like we mentioned, the focus is more on the pandemic, the economy, and now other foreign affairs issues that we're going through right now. But the approach we've seen so far is on foreign policy and trade is that it will focus on the workers, like I mentioned, and middle income families. Like Jack Sullivan also mentioned, globalization has increased inequality, accelerated the industrialization, and failed to boost U.S. productivity. We did see that President Trump was somewhat of a nationalist and wanted to, keep industry, was against globalization, but because of other areas. Now we see the same pattern, but more focus on the workers and things like that. So as a result, President Biden has promised to focus on domestic priorities to boost U.S. competitiveness, include investing trillions of dollars into energy, education, infrastructure. They just passed the bill, so we'll see how that goes in the Senate, but it's a very expensive bill to implement some of these things that we're talking about. Implementing federal Buy American policies to favor domestic producers and strengthening workers' bargaining powers, going back to unions. Also, the tone will change with foreign policy and trade, as we've seen. It will not be just go it alone like Trump, I do it on my own, regardless of what anyone else thinks. But a team effort in regards to trade with our trading partners and allies, especially to deal with the China situation. Also, in this administration, in difference from the Trump administration, climate and environment will be crucial, will play a crucial role in the foreign policy and trade, the big push for green energies and electric vehicles. Again, going back to the energy issues that we discussed in the USMCA section, Mexico might have a conflict with the US regarding green energies because of their push now for oil and gas and things like that. So it's going to be interesting how that transpires. And also, the Biden administration will be fully committed to proactive and constructive engagement with the World Trade Organization, compared to Trump, that was kind of against the World Trade Organization. Now, Biden wants to work with the WTO, and obviously full support to the new Director General, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, which was Nigeria's former finance minister. So, in summary, we're going back to business as usual mode, but with a focus on domestic interests for industry, U.S. industry, U.S. worker families, and the environment. So that's where we're headed with the Biden administration. Some of the ongoing questions since early this year. We don't expect Section 301 to go away anytime soon, at least for this year. We definitely not going to see it go away in 2021. Now, we might see exclusions come back, maybe at the later part of this year. They will install the exclusion process again, which companies can apply and get exemptions from Section 301 tariffs, probably to be put into place in 2022. But we also see Section 301 going through 2022 also. And then we have a lawsuit that some companies have against the U.S. government through the Court of International Trade with regards to the China tariffs for list 3 and list 4A that supposedly Trump put in place without doing their due diligence, and they're not legal, you want to put it that way. So that case might bring some ending or reduction of products for Section 301 tariffs, but that, as with a lot of litigation, this case is dragging along. So we're probably not going to see anything come out of this lawsuit until probably sometime next year. As far as if the results of the lawsuit are if it's in favor of the demandants, if it's gonna get rid of the Section 301, we'll see. But for now, for the short time being, we're still gonna see Section 301 tariffs. Also, phase 2 agreement with China that will kept, stay pending from the Trump administration. I don't think we're going to see anything this year from the Biden administration in that regards. And also Section 232, 201, and other Section 201s. I think we don't see any major changes. I know that for the European Union and the Section 201, I think that's being negotiated, but we don't see new Section 301, Section 232, Section 202s being implemented, but whatever we have, it's probably going to stick around for a little bit long. Also, again, we have a push for electric vehicles. And the USMCA with the USMCA, North America will become more attractive, like we've been mentioning before, for alternative manufacturing and key supply chains. So we know that the Biden administration is working to make North America, in particular Mexico, more attractive to global business, thereby providing stiffer competition to China-based supply chains. So again, reshoring or companies from Asia moving to Mexico, that's something that we see is gonna keep happening. Hopefully the AMLO administration will be open to that and will shift a little bit some of their policies to be accommodating to this trend that we can see. And obviously because of the emphasization of the administration to reduce dependence on Chinese manufacturing, especially for goods that are for national security and public health, such as PPE, medical devices, drugs, etc. So, I think USMCA is going to allow us to pivot the growth in North America because of all the factors, all the things going on. I don't want to say that, all this, take advantages of this crisis that we're going through, but reality is reality. I mean, it's a given that USMCA can help mitigate some of the issues that we're having or that we had last year with the pandemic. One big thing that the Biden administration, and it actually started way before, and Trump really also emphasizing this, is forced labor. Because during Trump's administration, CBP stepped up its enforcement of U.S. laws prohibiting the importation of goods made from forced labor, including forced child labor. So there's a lot of withhold release orders on importers, and they're working closely with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, on forced labor practices. And this is particularly in China, specifically on the wide use of forced labor in the Xinjiang region. We see cotton and tomatoes and silicone. Those are pretty active right now. So, so it's very important for importers to analyze their supply chain, and if they're obtaining materials from areas that are monitored by CBP or forced labor, to change that or to ensure that they're exempt from this. So it is critical for importers to monitor this. It's becoming an additional layer of administration of the supply chain to include forced labor issues in supply chain analysis and processes. So again, we can expect Biden to continue with this posture towards China and increase into other parts of China and even to other countries, including Mexico, because under USMCA, they have that in specific terms in the labor chapter. So again, just as importers, just be due diligent with your supply chain analysis for forced labor. E-commerce, again, that's a big thing going on. The pandemic changed the way we buy things, groceries and consumables. Everything's going through e-commerce. Well, not everything, but the shift to e-commerce has been increased dramatically. That's why I mentioned in the U.S. Customs statistics about Section 80, Type 86 entries. They're booming right now because there's a lot of importations from other countries that are taking advantage of the threshold of $800. So this is going to continue to grow, but CBP will have to monitor this to ensure that there's compliance, that there's not, abusive piecemealing of shipments just to get away from a regular transaction. But we see a growth in e-commerce, and that's not going to stop. That's a new pattern. That's a new culture of consumers buying products. Okay. Okay. One comment from United States Trade Representative Catherine Tai. President-elect Joe Biden and I share a commitment to pursuing trade policies that support and benefit American workers, that combat the threat of climate change, that fuel American innovation and increase American competitiveness. So this is also an indication of the USTR, where we're headed, and again, focusing on American workers, climate change, and labor rights, etc. So as we saw in the earlier parts of the presentation, we see that we're going to see some challenges on regards to labor and things like that in the near future. But I think we'll be good and go through them. Okay. With that, that's the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I know there were some parts that were technical. So we're gonna share the presentation, the live recording, and now we're gonna try to answer some questions. So okay. The first question that I have is, given the changes, how will the Rio Grande Valley region benefit? Are there particular RV industries that will benefit more than others? I mean, real RGV industries maybe, or are there industries or countries that will consider recruiting to the RGV because of USMCA? Well, the second part of the answer of the question, that's easy to answer. Yes, like we discussed. Yes, we already seen an influx of companies that are interested in relocating to the Rio Grande Valley area. Some Chinese companies, some European companies, because they want to take advantage of USMCA, and also because they see that the supply chain is kind of tightening because of the issues that we have with COVID. In regards to your the first part of the question, particular industries that will benefit more than others. Well, we see that the maquila industry, the IMEX industry, here in the USA, it will be the molding, plastic molding, metal stampings, logistics providers, warehousing. That's going to benefit. Those are the areas that we're going to see they're going to grow. Which in turn, if we see more plastic molding, more metal stamping, more warehouses, more logistics, more trucking, that's translated into jobs, which will benefit other industries, the retail, the hotels, the hospitality industries, and the medical and educational. So yeah, the impact it's beneficial all over. So. Yes, there's a question. Sets you mentioned all components need to be originating. So then the 10% de minimis cannot be applied. Yes, okay. For the sets, yeah, all they have to be originating, but the 10% de minimis can apply if, let's say, one of the components or two of the components of the set, their value is less than 10%, then you can apply the de minimis. Yeah, so in general terms, all components will have to be originating, each individual component. But then a separate provision on the USMCA, we have the de minimis. So you can apply the 10% de minimis if one or two of the components are non-originating, but they're less than 10%, the set will still qualify for preferential treatment. Okay, so you can apply the minimis as well. Okay. Now I'm going to go to chat. Okay. How can we identify an electronic or digital signature in a certification of origin? Well, that has to do, the certification of origin, obviously, it has to be signed by a company representative. The methodology, how it's done, obviously, the simple answer is the signature with a pen. However, the issue with electronic signatures, I know that for NAFTA certificate of origins, there are some binding rulings that allow electronic or digital signatures. Now, it is not like you select a specific font in Word or whatever and in cursive and you use that as a signature. No, it has to be an autograph signature that is put in some sort of computer picture and that is then cut or plasmated into the certificate of origin. That's what is a digital signature. And from a U.S. Customs perspective, that was allowed, that is acceptable. Now, I presume that that can also be translated to the USMCA certification. Again, I'm speaking on the side of U.S. Customs. They will allow electronic or digital signatures on certification of origins based on the precedents that we have with NAFTA certificates. But again, it's not that you select certain fonts to make a signature. It has to be the actual signature, but in electronic form. Okay, I hope that answers that question. What has this meant to our economy locally? What is expected? Well, obviously, locally, since NAFTA, we have seen a boom in growth in trade here, particularly with the maquila industry. We expect with USMCA to have a continuation of that growth, obviously with ups and downs because we have recessions and economic downturns, and then we had the pandemic, which kind of created a recession, but that was not created not by economic lack of economic activity, but because of forced shutdowns. Now, once things opened up again, we're seeing that growth. Now, what's expected? Well, because of the pandemic, we're learning our lessons like we discussed, and we expect the reshoring of the companies, the tightening of the supply chains, have more regional supply chains, which translates to additional investments in our region and more jobs. So we expect, growth in our area. Electronic signatures, I think that the way I answer my question, I answer this part. Again, there's no specific U.S. regulations on that, but Customs has issued binding rulings regarding this matter already, that is acceptable. And okay, I answered the question for the de minimis on sets. This and previously webinar recordings, well, this will be available tomorrow, Friday, I'm sorry. The prior ones that were recorded, I don't know if they're available or not, they're in archive, but they can be provided, given if you let MEDC know. The slides will be shared. I'm going to send the presentation to the MEDC, and they can share it if you request a copy. Okay, but they will be there as well. Okay. Okay. Again, the PowerPoint. Okay. Yes, it is. I'll share. Okay. 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 So with that, we're gonna do the raffle with the people that are right now. So good luck to everyone, and let's see who wins.
Okay. The first person, M. Chavez.
The first winner is M. Chavez. So congratulations. And please contact MEDC so that you can take care of getting your tickets. And the second winner is Sergio Villegas. congratulations again. Contact MEDC to get your ticket. Thanks, Omar, for donating these 2 tickets, and congratulations to the winners. Well, I hope I answered a few questions that we had, and I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. It will be the video will be available on Friday, and if you need a copy of the presentation, you can get it from the MEDC as well. And well, thank you very much, and have a great day.